How do you want to be introduced, by the way?
I don't know. How were you planning on introducing me?
I don't know.
If you want my official title, I can give you that.
How do you want your name?
Well, usually when Fletcher calls out my name, he does the alphabet soup at the end because
Yeah,
I think he enjoys it.
I
So
do.
so it's always D. Jeremy DeMar, and then all the other fluff if you want it.
What is all the other fluff?
So the MA is for the master's degree. The CPE, of course, you know what that is, and the ENP, of course, that's the topic of conversation today. I don't put a lot of the other stuff on there because it just gets too crazy.
But what is it? You have Kamal, right?
I have ComL, credentialed ComL. I've got RPL, CPE, ENP, CMCP, of course, my master's degree. What else? Probably for, yeah, that's probably it for certifications worth mentioning.
Okay.
But the official title, if you want it, I don't know if you do or not.
I do, yes.
Director of Outreach and Engagement. I didn't make it up. And of course, the company is NGA 911.
What's that stand for?
Next Generation Advanced.
Gotcha.
I had to look it up too.
Okay. Good deal. As always, we can edit.
You do a fine job of that.
That's what I try. Hey, it's Fletch. Welcome to this episode of Off the Cuff True Confessions of an ENP. So, today, once again, a little bit off the wall. I'm joined by Jeremy DeMar, D. Jeremy DeMar, who has at the end of his name MA, CPE, ENP, ComL, RPL, CMCP, ABCD, EFG, and just about every other combination of characters in the alphabet. A good friend of mine. Welcome once again. I just want to talk about the ENP today.
It's good to be back, and we had just discussed all the different things that were going to be at the end of my name, and I think it's just CPE, NP, and MA right now, but we can stick with ENP, whatever you want to talk about.
Okay, now, being that it's off the cuff True Confessions of an ENP, I think we'll just stay with that.
Sounds good.
So, you most recently were the director at Mountain View Communications here in New Jersey. We finally got you out of the state after a year, and you took on a new position.
I did. Yeah, actually, last day at Mountain Valley was, what was it, October 15th, I think it was. And I started with NGA 911 as their Director of Outreach and Engagement on the following Monday, October 18th. So I've been there since then, and it's been great. Been great thus far.
Director of Outreach and Engagement. So that's a DOOE.
That's the first I've actually heard of somebody refer to it that way, but that's good. Now I can remember it that way.
You just need more letters behind your last
Yeah,
name.
yeah. No, I was going to say I'm trying to stick with what I've got. It gets a little overwhelming.
Thanks so much for being on today. So, when did you become an ENP, first of all?
So I knew you were going to ask that question because I watched your other couple of sessions, and that was, I think, probably the first question that came out. So I actually had to look. I didn't realize I've actually recertified twice. So my original date of certification was October, I think it was October 16th of 2012. So I've been an ENP since then, have recertified twice, and obviously continued to be certified till today.
Now, what did you do for your recertifications? You're a guy that's out. You're all over the place. You're constantly speaking. You're doing a bunch of stuff. Points are probably easy for you.
Yeah, that's, I remember the first time I went through recertification, I was a bit concerned that I wasn't going to have enough points to get through the process, but I quickly discovered both through academic credentials and other industry involvement that it was relatively straightforward and I don't want to say simple, but I had more than enough involvement in the industry to make that recertification process pretty simple. So.
Yeah, I mean, for different board positions, there are a lot of avenues where you can collect points. And if you're active in the industry, which is the whole purpose of the points, if you're active, you're current. If you're current, you're knowledgeable. And, we don't make you go through that 9 million question test a second time. Although I took it 2 times just because I wanted to see what was changing with Next Gen 911. So I actually did take it on my first recertification. I think I had the points, but I don't mind taking tests. And, it's not a bad test to take. It's long, but they give you plenty of time. So
Well, it's funny you mentioned that as well, because my I should say my former deputy director, probably soon to be the executive director at Mountain Valley down in New Providence, New Jersey, Keely Heyman, she just obtained her ENP certification a few months back. And she was talking to me a little bit about the differences in the test, the question set, so on and so forth, in contrast to what I had experienced back in 2012. So it sounds like, and again, having gone through the recertification process without the test, it sounds like a lot of the content in there has been adjusted and adapted for where we are as an industry and a profession right now. So that's good to see.
yeah, and I can tell you, I mean, the NIB board, which I'm the Northeast liaison for, meets once a year. Typically at the SBP conference, we take a few days before that and get together, and we go through and we actually there are a bunch of different tests or test copies. We select one for that year with the questions, and then we go through and we take those tests. And I think we pull 2 or 3 tests each year, and we go through each question and we dissect the answers, make sure they're still relevant, make sure they're valid, get rid of the old stuff that's not valid anymore. And I can tell you over the past couple of years, it's gone through a major cleansing.
Yeah.
We're really getting to the point where we're going, you know what, it's legacy. It has no value anymore. So we're just going to throw that one out completely. And we're backfilling with new NG content.
Yeah, and I would argue, I mean, I think to a certain degree that legacy content is important from a historical perspective, just to give those that are taking the test a little bit of context as to where we've been and how far we've come and what's going on. But yeah, to your point, we do need to be focusing on the future side of this and kind of where the business is going. But that historical perspective is important as well.
Yeah, I mean, a good example is, I mean, you need to understand camera trunks and, the MF signaling tones and how the data communicates. You don't need to know that the effective baud rate of that communication path is whatever, right?
Yeah.
You just need to know that it's slow.
And it's funny, you study certain aspects of that test, and if you participate in a study group, which I highly recommend, you study like crazy in these certain sections, thinking that the test is going to be littered with questions from that, only to find out when you get in, wow, there were no questions on that. So if you think you can go through the study group and really figure out exactly what you're going to need to know to do well on the test, the folks that put that test together have kind of thought through that, and you're going to be surprised at what's actually on the test versus what was in the study groups that you participate in.
Yeah, absolutely. And, again, and that's to make the test fair. And we actually analyze the company, the professional company that does the testing for us, provides this really in-depth analytical study of the questions, the number of correct answers, the number of incorrect answers, but very, very deep within that. Most people that got this question wrong got wrong because they chose C and the real answer was A. And then we analyze, why did they do that? Did we not phrase it correctly? Are we misleading them too far? There's really, I got to give the NIB a lot of credit. There is a lot of research, thought, and process that goes in each and every year to that test. And personally, I'm a little jaded, obviously, but I think it shows.
Yeah. And it's important to have that updated content to make sure it remains relevant and consistent with what's going on industry-wide for us. Absolutely mission critical to have that.
So, speaking of mission critical, so they run a study group. Tracy Eldridge runs a study group.
Yep.
There's an online reference out in Colorado that's still there. I don't know if they've updated it lately, but I know they've had a treasure trove of content there. There is great information. I'm going to say the study groups are probably some of the most important things that you can do.
Yeah. From a preparation standpoint, and if for no other reason, it really gave me the opportunity. I mean, going back to 2012, it really gave me an opportunity to network with a lot of folks that I otherwise may not have met. You go to conferences and those kind of things, and you casually meet people while you're going about your business and going to different sessions and such. But it was a completely different group of people that were in that study group, and some of them to this day I still speak with. Relative to our involvement in that process and going through the study group together. And it's just, it's a very impactful group, but it's absolutely worthwhile. And anybody that's asking questions about it, it doesn't really matter where you go, but the study group by far is really what I attribute my success to, that passing that test the first time around. You got to have it.
What did you think when you first sat down for the test? Now, you and I took it face to face. We didn't have virtual as an option back there because there was no COVID, thank God.
Right.
But that seems to be a thing lately. I don't know if you read the paper or not, but
yeah, a little thing. Yeah.
What did you feel when you walked out of that? First of all, what did you feel when you walked up to the proctor and said, "I'm done"? Were you confident?
Well, I think it gave you. I think it gives you an indication, at least it did at the time. I want to say that it gives you that preliminary rating to say whether or not, kind of that little blurb that says you did or you didn't. I
Yeah,
want to say that
you got to pass fail. But
right.
what did you think walking up? Did you think you passed? Did you know you passed? Did you say, geez, I wonder?
I can tell you, the folks that, and I'm happy to say, I believe there's several folks from Rochester, New York, where I was a dispatcher before I became a supervisor, before taking that test, that have now since gone through that same program and taken that test. But there were a lot of those folks who asked me, what was it like? And I said, I had never studied for a test more so than I did for ENP, with the exception maybe of my New York State emergency medical technician exam the first time I took it. But by far, I studied like crazy for that. But there was this overwhelming sense of, I don't want to call it security, but I felt pretty good once I started seeing the questions popping, that I had studied the right material and started retaining it. But you're absolutely right. When you get to the end of it and you get all the way through, and you go to your proctor and you pencils down, for lack of a better term, and you say, I'm all set, and you walk out and you're like, you know what, all that studying absolutely paid off. And I'm relatively certain walking out of there that I left in a good spot, and hopefully with favorable results.
By the way, it's really good to know that you studied for your EMT test, because if I ever open my eyes and you're working on me, I really want to feel good about it.
Yeah, no, it was something you needed to do back then. But that's an interesting point as well, because when you talk about recertification, and of course, when you go through that EMT research, you can go through and challenge the written and the practical. But what do you have at that point that really makes that a little bit less intense of a process at that point? You've got a lot of field experience and a lot of things that you've gleaned from being in the business. It's kind of the same way with the ENP exam. And that's why those that go out for recertification, and anybody that's asking about ENP, I always tell them this. Yeah, you got to take the test the first time. You can decide to do that 4 years later if you want, or through industry involvement, you can go out and basically acquire enough points so that you automatically get that. So I like the fact that NENA encourages that industry involvement, and they're not specific about that involvement being just with NENA. I mean, they're doing things with APCO. If you have academic credentials, they honor a lot of those different things. So all of that helps to build that war chest of experience that you can use to recertify.
Let's talk a little bit about your experience as a center director. I know you weren't a good one, but you were one. What did you think about as far as hiring people with their ENP certification? Is it something that you looked for? How did that affect your management style?
What was wonderful for me being in that particular role is when I was able to start putting together job announcements for specific roles, positions, so on and so forth, especially when you got into that administrative level. You could tell when you were looking at job offerings from around the country in different places where they had folks that had the industry credentials and industry background and those that didn't, because more often than not, you would see on the job announcement that it clearly articulated, may not have required it, but it clearly articulated that it wanted you to have ENP certification or RPL or CP, whatever it happens to be, within a certain amount of time after appointment. It was actually preferred prior to appointment, but they absolutely wanted to have it afterwards. That was something else that we did when we were putting together job announcements for our center. We put those certifications in there from an industry standpoint, not just because we wanted to make sure that we had people that had actually gone out and did that, but because those of us that had taken those things initially and become certified in those or credentialed in those understood the value of what those certifications brought to the table and understood the underlying knowledge that comes with completing that course of study and completing the test and how that applies to what you're doing real world style when it comes to 911 and emergency communications. Huge amount of value. And for as long as I was in that director role, that was something that I almost insisted when we were putting those things together, even for like CTOs and for supervisory, frontline operational positions. We wanted to encourage our folks to get those certifications. And if you don't have them coming in, be prepared to go out and get those certifications afterward. It's going to make you a more well-rounded candidate, number one, but a more well-rounded and effective supervisor or leader in that space once you've obtained those certifications. That's why it was a big thing for us.
So when you ran the centers, Jeremy, did you have the decision-making power to say, we're going to send our people to these classes? Because there's a cost involved.
Yep, absolutely. I think maybe not so much in Springfield when I was first there. That was my first center, and that's only because of the way things were structured there. But certainly when I was at Mountain Valley down in New Providence, that was something as we were putting those things together that we could actually do. And you're right, but the costs that are associated with those certification programs, more often than not, are very, very affordable. When you talk about what folks are spending academically in other areas right now to get different types of academic credentials, the cost associated with these different certification programs within our profession are really very cost effective. And that was a big push. And for me, it's not like where somebody comes up and says, I've got a bachelor's in this or an associate's in this, which may or may not directly correlate to what we're doing. But when you can say that we have an opportunity in this particular space to be able to bring somebody in that's certified in that particular aspect, we know that it's knowledge that's built into a business that we are working in and day out, and not something that we have to try to find similarities in based on what's going on somewhere else.
I think most people that are in public safety as an industry for a profession understand the value of an ENP. How does that translate out into the private sector? With both companies that are directly involved in contributing to the public safety market and consumers, private corporations that might have a large, role within public safety, within their facility.
I think, one of the reasons why I did it initially, and again, I started out in 2012. I was only, I think, a shift supervisor for a year or so when I became EMP certified, but I did it because I felt that the credential was important to show that I was not only vested in the industry, but because I knew I wanted to grow within the business itself up into a director level role. So I knew that in order to separate myself from everybody else that's applying for these jobs all over the region, I needed to do something above and beyond what others were doing to really show that level of commitment to the profession. That was probably the single biggest reason why I did it when I was still on the public side and really still driving to move up within the public sector ranking. Now on the private side, it absolutely shows the level of commitment and the understanding that someone like myself has in a particular role to make sure that those that are talking to us about the solutions that we're offering, whatever they happen to be, that we are in there competently talking about these different technologies, that we know what we're talking about, and we have that industry credential to back it up. So I would say to anybody considering it, whether you're public or private sector, that's what it does. ENP certification stands out as a statement to let folks know that you're absolutely serious about what's going on in the emergency communications and PSAP space. And there's inherent value in having that certification, regardless of whether or not you're on the public or the private side, from the outside looking in. People want to see that you're committed, and that's what that shows.
I think most people around surrounding this industry are familiar with your name, if not know who you are. So you can walk in with the "Hi, I'm the D. Jeremy DeMar certification. I'm me. So this is who I am." And you've got that level of credibility. But I think you're right. When you have an ENP behind your name, or even in one of the other certifications, it states that you've made a commitment to your industry, your profession, and you've achieved a certain level of certification. I mean, this is who you are. And I think it immediately, I noticed at least, it gave me an immediate level of respect with other people that were credentialed and not credentialed in that industry. It was just immediate recognition as this guy knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, and for me, the first center again up in Rochester when I was there, I want to say I was either the second, well, I was either the third or the fourth to obtain ENP certification in my center at the time. But the great thing about that was, and what I really love about that, especially for those that are up and comers within the business, they see you doing those things, and that encourages them to go out and pursue these enhanced level of training and these enhanced certifications within the profession, because they know that that's going to help steer their particular ship in an appropriate direction. So it's one thing when you attain those certifications yourself and you work hard for them and you study for them and you understand the value there. It's another thing entirely when those who otherwise might not have done anything with this to try to pursue these certifications go out, involve themselves in these programs, get involved in the study groups, and then go out and successfully complete this in order to obtain certification. That shows to me, that demonstrates to me that these folks are absolutely committed. They saw the value in it when I did that, and now they see the value because they themselves are part of that as well. So that's just a huge part of it, and probably one of the biggest satisfaction levels for me.
When you took on your new job, do you think your EMP certification helped you there, or have you just been around for so long as a dinosaur, they knew you knew what you were doing?
Yeah, I don't like to think of myself as a dinosaur, but no, NGA 911 is a tremendous company. Again, I've been with them for a very short period of time, but the folks that I've talked to are extremely passionate and committed to doing what they're doing within the industry. But they're very big on the NINA I3 side as well. So I can almost assure you that to some degree, my ENP certification played a role in me coming on as well. But again, they want to be able to have folks representing them out in the field when they're talking to public safety partners and potential customers and prospects and those kind of things. They want to have that additional layer of credibility with their workforce out in the field. And it's one thing to be able to go into a center and say, hey, you know what? I was a dispatcher, I was a supervisor, I was a director. It's another thing entirely to say, I was all those things and I obtained ENP certification. So I have an even greater understanding, not from an operational standpoint, but from an academic and structural standpoint about how these systems work and why they're important. So I think to a certain degree that probably did play a part in my appointment with NGA.
And I know a few other people over at that company, Steve O'Connor, and you do have a few ENPs on staff.
Yep. Yep, absolutely. And there's definitely a push too amongst our group. As I said, most of the interaction that I've had thus far with the folks that are involved in our company has been virtual, as you can imagine. We're an international company, so a lot of what we're doing is just via like what you and I are talking about right now. But we have had conversations and talked about the importance of these certifications, be they ENP or any of the other ones that are out there. But everybody that I have talked to that has attained certification is doing it, number one, because they want to show that they've done the extra effort, that they put the effort in to show that they have a better understanding of how the business works. But more importantly, maybe they've seen myself and others who have moved up within the public sector into different roles. Maybe to some degree, they attribute that to the fact that we did put an extra effort in and go out and get these certifications so that we can show that we are absolutely committed not only to performing well within this industry, but improving it. And that's really the big part for me, especially for those folks that are getting the ENP certification right now. You and I talked a little bit earlier about how the content of those tests changes periodically and how we go through different areas of that and different content comes up. That's why it's important for this new generation of ENPs that are coming in to go through the study groups, to get a good baseline knowledge and to take that test, because that's going to give them that solid foundational understanding that they need to perform well, not only as the dispatcher, but certainly as they move up the ranks into supervision and perhaps into administration and training as well. There's benefits across the board, regardless of what role you're in.
No, and it does cover everything from an HR perspective, from a technology perspective, from a legislative perspective. I mean, it does cover the full gamut there. And, I think it does a pretty good job. I mean, I can tell you that a lot of effort goes in every year to making that test and the body of knowledge, the book of knowledge, very, very informative and useful as a guide. I mean, an initiative that I was involved with just over this last year was we totally redid all the graphics in the body of knowledge to make sure that all the icons matched, all the terminology matched. We use dashed lines here consistently, solid lines here, little things like that, but just made sure that the graphics cleaned up a lot. And I mean, that was a big effort by quite a few different people over, gosh, I'm going to say probably 6 months just to
Yeah.
clean that up throughout that 1 inch thick book.
But that absolutely speaks to the importance of making sure that things are not just on point, but also relevant based on what's going on right now. So all of you, you and your group taking a look at that to make sure that that content is where it needs to be, shows those that are partaking in this journey right now for the first time that you're committed to making sure that the information is relevant, up to date, and ready to go, so that they're not just dealing with the old stuff or the legacy stuff, so to speak. That even though there's a value there, we need to make sure that the folks that are taking those tests today are seeing where really the industry is going and really where technology is taking us as well. So kudos to you and your team for making sure that's getting done.
Well, thanks very much. So let me ask you, Jeremy. You come across a person, hey, you know what? I'm thinking about becoming getting into the public safety industry, or I just got into the public safety industry. I'm looking at how I can formulate my career. What advice do you have for somebody that's about to step into the center or just stepped into the center and said, whoa, what the hell am I doing here?
Yeah. It's interesting. It's difficult for me from my perspective many times because of where I started and where I ended up before I shifted over to the private side. You have to, when somebody's presenting that question to you, or you're posing that question to somebody, you have to remember that everybody is not in this business for the same particular reason. We had a lot of folks in all of the centers that I was affiliated with that did exceptional jobs as dispatchers or call takers. And that was really just where they wanted to be. They were very, very happy with that. And there was no specific need or desire to move up into supervision or training for that matter. And we need those people. We need those people to show up on a regular basis, do an outstanding job. And it's great that we have people like that that are willing to do that and are completely content in doing that for the duration of their career. There are others, however, and this is really where the mentor side of things comes in for me. It was not that long ago that I had somebody that was not even when I was in the 911 profession that I have talked about publicly, who was really a mentor to me and really demonstrated to me that he saw value in what I brought to the table, spent a very, very little amount of time with me, and for whatever reason got it to click. And at that point, after that, I kept going up and up and up, and just I was constantly striving to kind of move up and do different things. When you find those people that really want to move up within the organization, and you yourself have been in those different roles, CTO and supervisor and director, those are the people that you really want to kind of take under your wing, so to speak, and say, these are some of the steps that you can take to be effective and to make that upward track possible for yourself. And again, the biggest reason why I would encourage folks to be looking into these different academic and educational tracks, especially as it pertains to certification, is because, once again, you're not only learning about what our business does and how it operates, but you're also demonstrating to a prospective employer somewhere down the line that you are fully committed not only to what you're doing in the 911 business, but to understanding fundamentally how it works. And that's really what separates, those that want to go far to those that really want to go far and go fast quickly.
Now, good advice, great advice. And I think that's really important is the mentorship within this industry, no matter what it is, whether it's a training or it's an operational or it's just in your day-to-day job or, gee, you know what, I found a better way to do things. This is probably one of the prime industries I've ever experienced where mentorship is really critical. And I think that's a good candidate topic to add to training, mentorship.
Yeah. Yeah. And you have to. I mean, we talk as leaders in this space, we constantly talk to our people about going out and working with staff, especially newer staff, to make sure they're in a good position and that they're feeling pretty good about where they're at. But as a director, most recently, I mean, I was roughly 10 years removed from a frontline radio or phone position situation. And because of that, I don't consider myself to be necessarily the best person to talk to those folks that are out on the floor that are having a particularly difficult time or that want to move up to a particular rank or a particular position within the organization, which is why I would like to involve some more of my frontline folks to help them out on that mentorship side of things and maybe who can more closely relate. I think once we get to the point where we're talking about folks moving up into administration, which we absolutely need committed folks to move into frontline supervisor roles, training coordinator roles, deputy director roles, and so on. But that's when I think, they have those initial conversations with the frontline folks on the floor, and then they come out and they engage someone like myself who's been through those different areas and might be able to more effectively help them navigate those waters to get into these higher level roles. But it's all about involvement. It's all about working with your folks to make sure that they understand that you have a vested interest in their success. And that success may not even be in the 911 center, maybe in a completely different vertical somewhere. But whatever you do, show a genuine interest in your people, take a genuine interest in where they want to be, what they're doing now, and where they want to go. And whatever you can do, and hopefully if it's staying in the 911 business, so to speak, those comments, that encouragement that you give them is going to start steering their ship in the appropriate direction. And hopefully you'll have them in one of these high level positions someday making big decisions as well.
I think another thing that's really important when you take on a leadership role is from the very first day, you need to start training your replacement so that when the time does come for you to leave, for whatever reason, you're leaving your center in good hands. And although I never met her, just from how you speak about her, I think you had that opportunity in New Jersey.
Yeah, Keely is awesome. She's doing a lot of great things down there, and she's going to continue to do a lot of great things. But that was one of the things that I recognized when I first arrived there was that, I wanted to have it set up in such a way, to the point that you just made, that if for some reason the proverbial bus ran over me as I was walking across the street, you have to be able to, that person that's directly working underneath you has to be able to pick up the reins and run with them from square one. And if you're doing everything as the leader or director in that space and not sharing that process, those procedures, those important attributes of what you do on a daily basis with those that you're working with directly or those that report to you, how can we expect that turnkey side of the business is going to happen as quickly and as expeditiously as we would like? That's why it's absolutely critical to make sure that your frontline supervisors, your deputy directors, your training coordinators, all those folks, they're able to participate in different aspects of the leadership process so that it's not just you as the director or the manager of the center making all the decisions. Involve your personnel in that process, have them give information and give different recommendations and ideas for why they think things should be done a certain way. Not only is that going to better, make them better aware of what's going on, but ultimately you're creating better buy-in amongst your staff as well, because you are bringing their information in, their ideas, and hopefully that was part of what you ultimately decided to do as a leader in that space, that it's going to make it 10 times better for you.
Mr. DeMar, your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to contact Keely and tell her that she's going to be on a future episode.
Oh, I would be happy to do that. She'd love to talk to you. She'd love to talk to you.
Yeah, no, I definitely, I don't really care about you. I'm using you to get to her.
I'm sure it's not the first time, and I'm sure it won't be the last.
Well, listen, my friend, I really appreciate you sitting down. Thanks for all you do in the industry too, by the way. You're one of those iconic folks in the industry that many, many people look up to. and so well respected. It's just amazing, and that includes respect from me as well. Thanks so much for sitting down with me. You're just an absolute wealth of knowledge and a great example of a public safety leader.
Thank you, Fletch. Always a pleasure, my friend.
All right, stay out of New Jersey.
I'll be down next week for the New Jersey NETA conference. What are you talking?
I'm gonna have to call the boys at State Police.
See you all in Atlantic City. Looking forward to it.
All right, brother. Have a great one. Thanks very much.
You
All right, bye-bye. That was good.
Nice.
I like that.